It was supposed to be a simple date, not a public humiliation. But when I saw the empty chair across from me and realized he wasn't coming, I laughed too loudly just to hide the sting in my chest before the laughter broke into a sob I couldn't swallow. No one in that downtown cafe cared enough to look twice except for him. The man at the next table, dressed in a charcoal blazer with a loosened tie, watching me with the kind of curiosity that felt both invasive and kind. He wasn't just anyone. He was my professor. I wiped my face with the back of my sleeve, burning with the kind of shame that makes your skin itch, the kind that says you've just given the world a front row seat to your private collapse. I thought I could disappear if I pressed hard enough against the wooden chair. But then his voice broke through. "You know," he said softly, leaning closer, "crying in a cafe doesn't make you weak. It just makes you human. But crying alone, that's a crime against joy." I froze. His tone was casual, but there was something underneath it, a warmth that hooked into my ribs and refused to let go. The town of Ashford wasn't big. It lived between the whispers of cornfields and the restless sighs of highways stretching toward bigger, brighter places. I'd always felt too small here, too quiet, too fragile for a world that expected loud ambition. And tonight, abandoned on what was supposed to be my first real date in months, I felt microscopic. He was still looking at me, this Professor Ethan Wells. I'd known his name long before I stepped into his English literature class. Rumors had followed him. Brilliant, too young for tenure. Someone who had chosen this sleepy campus instead of a university that could have doubled his salary. Some said he was running from something. Others said he was just lost. But sitting across from me now, sliding his coffee mug aside as though he'd just found the evening's only reason worth staying, he didn't look lost at all. He looked like a man intent on understanding. "Bad night?" he asked. Could have lied. Could have swallowed the words until they turned bitter and sour in my stomach. But I was already cracked open. "He didn't show," I whispered. His eyebrows rose, a mix of surprise and something like anger, though not at me. "Then he's an idiot." That made me laugh, a small, shaky sound that surprised us both. His smile widened, the kind that pulled dimples into his cheeks and sent something warm flooding through me. "You deserve someone who shows up," he said simply. I should have left, should have gathered what was left of my dignity and walked home under the street lamps, hiding from the world until morning. Instead, I stayed. Maybe it was the way he spoke, like every word was a small rescue. Or maybe I was just too tired of pretending to be fine. We talked. About nothing at first: the weather, the bad coffee, the way the cafe's jukebox always played Sinatra at the wrong times. But then it deepened, the way conversations sometimes do when two people accidentally wander into honesty. I told him about my major, how everyone expected me to become something I wasn't sure I wanted. He told me about New York, about giving up the city lights for small-town quiet, about the loneliness of starting over where no one knew your story. Somewhere between confession and laughter, the shame that had clung to me like a second skin began to loosen. And when he finally leaned back, eyes studying me as though I were a poem worth rereading, I felt something I hadn't in a long time seen. But the world doesn't stop spinning just because you want it to. The next morning in class, Professor Wells wasn't the man from the cafe. He was poised, composed, every word measured. He didn't so much as glance in my direction longer than necessary. And yet, when he handed me back my essay, the corner of the page carried a note scrawled in handwriting so quick it looked like a secret. "Stop apologizing for existing. You're better than you think." I stared at it until the words blurred. That night, I lay awake in my dorm room, hearing the echo of his voice from the cafe. "You deserve someone who shows up." And the question I couldn't bury: what if that someone was him? The problem was obvious. He was my professor. I was his student. The boundaries weren't just invisible lines, they were walls, brick and unforgiving. And yet, walls have cracks. Weeks passed. Every class became a tug-of-war between pretending I hadn't felt something shift that night and the undeniable pull of his presence. He was sharp, demanding, the kind of professor who refused half-hearted answers. But in the quiet moments, when his gaze lingered a beat too long, when his voice softened on my name, I caught glimpses of the man who'd sat across from me, making me laugh through tears. And I hated myself for wanting more, because what I wanted wasn't allowed. One Friday evening, the campus buzzed with chatter as students spilled out of classrooms, chasing the weekend. I stayed behind, gathering my books slowly, waiting for the room to empty. When it finally did, I felt his eyes on me. "Still haunted by last week's exam?" he teased, leaning against the desk. I smirked. "Still haunted by your handwriting. I almost failed because I couldn't read your comments." His laugh was low, unguarded. And in that moment, the room felt smaller, charged. "I wasn't lying, you know," he said quietly. "About what?" His gaze caught mine, steady. "About you being better than you think." Something inside me broke. Or maybe it healed. Couldn't tell. "I'm trying," I whispered. "That's all anyone can ask." We stood there, silence stretching, 1,000 unsaid things crackling between us. And then, as if the universe couldn't bear the weight of possibility, the janitor entered, pushing a squeaky cart. The spell shattered, but the truth lingered. If I'd known how much that night in the cafe would change me, I would have clung to it tighter, because what followed wasn't a straight line into happiness. It was jagged, messy, stitched with fear. Ashford was small. Small towns carried long memories and loud opinions. Two men sitting too close in a cafe? It was enough to start whispers. A professor and a student exchanging smiles that lingered? It was enough to start fire. And yet, against the grain of gossip and against my own trembling hesitation, I couldn't stay away. Because for the first time, someone showed up. The whispers started small, like cracks in a wall you barely notice until the whole thing begins to tremble. At first, it was just glances, students tilting their heads when they saw me stop by his office hours more often than most, or when he lingered a little longer answering my questions after class. Maybe it was all in my head. Maybe I was the one painting meaning into every stolen glance, every carefully chosen word. But the more I tried to ignore it, the louder the silence between us became. Professor Ethan Wells Ethan, in my thoughts, never crossed the line. Not in public, not in private. He was professional to the point of cruelty sometimes, holding me to higher standards, never giving me an inch I hadn't earned. But I felt it, the pull, the electricity in the air when our hands brushed, the pause before he handed me back a paper, the rare softness in his voice when it was just us. It was killing me, and then one night it happened. The library was nearly empty, the clock striking close to midnight. I'd been drowning in research, my desk covered in highlighted articles and half-finished notes. My body was there, but my mind was replaying every smile, every whispered moment with him. I didn't notice him until his shadow fell across my desk. "You'll burn yourself out," he said, voice hushed in the cavernous silence. I looked up, startled. "I could say the same about you." He smiled, small and tired. He looked different at nightless professor, more man. His tie was gone, his sleeves rolled, his hair falling out of place. "What are you working on?" he asked, nodding to the pile of papers. "My thesis proposal," I muttered, "trying to prove that identity in modern American literature isn't just a Themite's survival." His eyes softened. Spoken like someone who knows a little about survival. The words lodged in my throat. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The world outside the library felt non-existent, like the walls were holding us in a secret that belonged only to us. "You should get some sleep," he said finally, though his tone lacked conviction. "I don't want to," I admitted before I could stop myself. He blinked, taken aback. "Why not?" "Because if I sleep," I whispered, "I'll dream about things I'm not allowed to want." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, dangerous, vibrating with the weight of confession. He didn't move, didn't breathe for a second too long. And then, with an almost imperceptible shake of his head, he whispered back, "You think you're the only one?" I don't remember how we ended up in the back of the library, tucked between tall shelves where no one came after midnight. I remember the way my pulse thundered in my ears, the way my hands trembled as he reached up, brushing a lock of hair from my face. "You're my student," he said, the words breaking like glass between us. And you're my professor, I breathed. But right now you're just you. For a moment I thought he'd walk away, that he'd gather his resolve, leave me shattered in the silence. But then his hand cupped my cheek, warm and steady, and his lips met mine. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't reckless. It was gentle, aching, like he'd been waiting for the right moment and knew this was it. My knees nearly gave out, but his arms held me steady. When he pulled back, his forehead resting against mine, his voice was raw. This can't happen. It already did, I whispered. The days after blurred into a haze of stolen moments and unbearable distance. In class, we were strangers. He asked questions. I answered like every other student. But when his gaze flickered to mine, I felt the echo of his lips, the weight of his hand. At night, it was different. Notes slipped into my books. Meet me by the old fountain. Midnight. Conversations whispered in quiet corners where no one dared to listen. We talked about everything: his past in New York, my fear of never being enough, the ways the world seemed determined to keep people like us small, quiet, invisible. And somewhere between laughter and tears, we built a world where it was just us. But secrets have sharp edges. The first time someone confronted me, it was a classmate, Jake. He was loud, brash, the kind of guy who treated women like trophies and professors like punching bags. "You and Wells," he sneered one afternoon when we crossed paths outside the cafeteria. "What's the deal? You sucking up for grades? Or just sucking?" The words hit like a fist. I wanted to deny it, to shove him against the wall and wipe the smirk off his face. Instead, I froze, my throat closing around the shame that boiled up inside me. I walked away, but his voice followed me. "Freak!" That night I cried. Not because of Jake, not even because of the word. I cried because part of me wondered if he was right, if what I felt for Ethan was doomed to be reduced to whispers, insults, shame. When I told Ethan, he listened in silence, his jaw tight. "Do you regret it?" he asked finally, voice breaking. "No," I said fiercely. "Not for a second." His hand found mine under the table. And though fear gnawed at the edges of my resolve, the truth was unshakable. I loved him, but love doesn't erase fear. One rainy evening, we met at the café, the same one where this all began. The air smelled of wet asphalt and coffee grounds, the windows streaked with raindrops. He sat across from me, his fingers tracing the rim of his cup, eyes heavy. "They're watching," he said finally. "Faculty. Students. I can feel it." I swallowed hard. "What does that mean for us?" His gaze lifted to mine, and I saw it there, the war inside him. Duty versus desire. Fear versus love. "It means I have to make a choice," he whispered. "And what about me?" I asked, voice cracking. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "You are the choice I want. But wanting and surviving aren't the same thing." Tears stung my eyes. "So what, we end it before it destroys us?" His silence was an answer I didn't want. That night, I walked home alone through the rain, every step heavier than the last. My chest burned with the cruel irony of it all. The man who showed up when no one else did was the same man I might have to let go. But deep down, I knew. Some loves weren't meant to be easy. They were meant to be fought for. And I wasn't ready to surrender. The rain had a way of amplifying silence. Every drop that hit my window that night felt like a countdown, like time pressing me toward a decision I wasn't ready to face. Ethan's words echoed inside me, heavy and unshakable. Wanting and surviving aren't the same thing. I lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling of my dorm room, thinking about all the ways life had taught me to shrink, to make myself smaller, quieter, less visible, to survive. And yet, for the first time, I didn't want survival. I wanted to live. I wanted him. The following week in class was unbearable. He was distant, colder than usual, every word clipped. To the others, he looked the same, confident, authoritative, untouchable. But I could see the cracks. The way his hand lingered too long on the edge of the desk. The flicker in his gaze when it swept past me. It wasn't rejection. It was restraint. And restraint felt worse than cruelty. After class, I cornered him. "Stop doing this." I hissed under my breath as students shuffled out. He blinked, startled. Doing what? Pretending you don't care. Pretending that night didn't happen. His jaw tightened. Because if I don't, we both lose everything. I stepped closer, my pulse hammering. Maybe everything is worth losing, if it means having something real. The room was empty now, silence swelling between us. His eyes darkened, his composure unraveling thread by thread. For a heartbeat, I thought he'd pull me into his arms right there. But instead, he turned away. Go, he whispered, voice raw. Before I stop being the man you think I am. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't let the world shame me into silence again. Not Jake, not the whispers, not the faculty. If Ethan was too afraid to choose us, then I'd choose for both of us. I showed up at his apartment. The building was old brick, tucked on the quieter side of town. I stood outside his door, soaked in adrenaline, my fist trembling as I knocked. When the door opened, his face shifted from surprise to dread to something softer in the span of a second. You can't be here, he said, voice low. I don't care, I shot back. I can't keep pretending this doesn't matter, that you don't matter. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing like a man standing on the edge of a cliff. If anyone sees you, then let them, I said. Let them see that I love you. The words burst out before I could stop them. For a moment the world froze. His eyes widened, his lips parted, and I thought I'd gone too far. But then, slowly, he stepped toward me. His hand cupped the back of my neck, pulling me in until our foreheads touched. You don't know what you're asking, he murmured, breath shaky. Yes, I do, I whispered. I'm asking you to stop running. And then he kissed me, desperate, consuming, the kind of kiss that steals air and gives back fire. We fell into each other that night, like two storms colliding. His apartment was small, books stacked in uneven towers, papers scattered across the floor. But it felt like a cathedral, holy in its secrecy. We didn't talk about rules or consequences. We didn't talk at all. Our bodies spoke the language of hunger, of longing, of a love that had been waiting in silence for too long. And when it was over, when the chaos settled into quiet, I lay in his arms, listening to the rhythm of his heartbeat. Tell me this isn't a mistake, I whispered. His fingers brushed through my hair. If it is, it's the only one I'd make twice. But the world wasn't blind. The very next week, I was summoned to the dean's office. The room smelled of polished wood and old leather, the walls lined with portraits of past authority. Dean Richards sat behind his desk, his hands steepled, eyes sharp. Mr. Carter, he began, there have been concerns raised about your relationship with Professor Wells. My stomach dropped. Concerns. Students talk, he said smoothly. Faculty observe. Late-night meetings, unusual familiarity. Paints a picture. I opened my mouth, but no words came. My throat was dry, my chest constricting. He leaned forward. I need to know if these concerns have any merit. For your sake. And for his. The choice was a blade. Protect Ethan or protect myself. My voice cracked. He's my professor. That's all. The dean studied me for a long moment, as if peeling back layers of skin. Then he nodded. Very well. Be careful, Mr. Carter. Reputations are fragile things. When I left, my hands shook so badly I nearly dropped my bag. That night, I went to Ethan's apartment again, heart pounding with a mix of anger and fear. They know, I said as soon as he opened the door. The dean called me in. His face paled. What did you say? That you're just my professor. Relief flickered across his features, but it was short-lived. He dragged a hand down his face, collapsing onto the couch. This is exactly what I was afraid of, he muttered. I sat beside him, gripping his arm. We can handle this. Together. He looked at me then, eyes burning with a mix of love and despair. You don't understand. If this gets out, I lose my job, my career, everything I've worked for. And what about us? I demanded. Do we just pretend it doesn't exist? That none of this is real. His silence was a knife. Tears burned behind my eyes. I told you I loved you. Was that not enough? His head snapped up, pain etched into every line of his face. It was too much. The words cut deeper than any insult. Too much. As if loving him was a burden he couldn't bear. I stood, my chest splintering. Then maybe I should take my too much somewhere else. I walked out before he could stop me. For days we didn't speak. Campus life went on as if nothing had happened. But I was hollow, every laugh forced, every breath heavy. At night, I replayed our moments: the cafe, the library, his apartment. I told myself I'd made a mistake, that love wasn't worth this kind of pain. And yet, when I closed my eyes, I still felt his hands, his lips, the way he whispered like the world might shatter if anyone overheard. And I knew the truth. I couldn't unlove him, no matter how much it hurt. It was a Friday night when it finally broke. I was walking home from the bookstore when I heard footsteps behind me. Before I could turn, a voice hissed, "Freak, Jake." He shoved me against the wall, his face twisted with anger. "Think you're better than us? Think you can screw your way to good grades?" My chest tightened, fear clawing at my throat. "Let go." But he didn't. He pressed harder, his spit flecking as he sneered. "You and Wells. Everyone knows. And you know what? You make me sick." Before I could respond, a voice thundered behind us. "Get your hands off him, Ethan." Jake froze, his grip loosening. Ethan strode forward, fury blazing in his eyes. "Touch him again, and you'll regret it." Jake muttered something under his breath and stalked off. But the damage was done. My body trembled, my breath shallow. Ethan reached for me, his hands gentle now. "Are you okay?" I wanted to scream, to rage, to tell him this was his fault for making me believe we could stay hidden forever. But instead, I collapsed against him, my tears soaking his shirt. And in that moment, I realized whatever came next, we couldn't run anymore. That night changed everything. For months, we'd been living between shadows, hiding behind stolen moments and whispered words. But when Ethan pulled me close on that dark street, when he shielded me with his body and held me as though I was the only thing that mattered, something inside me snapped. I was done being invisible. The next morning, I woke to a campus buzzing with rumors. Jake had done his job well, his words slithered through the halls like wildfire. Whispers of Wells and Carter. Laughter muffled behind hands. Stares that lingered too long. By noon, it wasn't just whispers. It was an open secret. And yet, for the first time, I didn't care. I found Ethan in his office, his tie loosened, his hands pressed against his temples as though he could squeeze the chaos out of existence. His desk was piled high with papers, but his eyes were far away. "They know," I said quietly. His shoulders tensed. He didn't look at me. "I know. They'll come after you." "Yes. And after me." "Yes." I stepped closer, my hands trembling. "Then let's stop pretending. Let's give them the truth." At that, his eyes finally lifted, stormy and tired. "Do you understand what you're asking? I'll lose my job. I'll be blacklisted from every university that matters. I've spent my whole life building this career. And what about your life outside of it?" I cut in. My voice broke, but I pressed on. "What's the point of all that success if you're alone? If you push away the one person who loves you more than anything?" He closed his eyes, his jaw tight. "You make it sound so simple." "Because it is," I whispered. "Love shouldn't be this complicated." The dean summoned him the next day. I waited outside the office, every tick of the clock clawing at my nerves. When Ethan finally emerged, his face was pale but calm. "What happened?" I asked, my voice shaking. "They're launching an investigation," he said flatly. "Ethics board. Faculty review. Could take weeks." My chest caved. "And us?" His eyes softened then, a crack in the armor. He reached for my hand quick, fleeting, but enough. "Us. We'll see it through. If you want to." Relief and fear collided in my chest. "I do. More than anything." The weeks that followed were brutal. Every class felt like a battlefield, every hallway a gauntlet. Some students avoided me like I carried a disease. Others smirked, their whispers sharp as knives. Faculty meetings buzzed with speculation. Through it all, Ethan and I held fast. Not in grand gestures or reckless displays, but in the small things. A glance across the room that said, "I see you." A note slipped into my book, "Hold on." A brief touch in passing, quick but grounding. It wasn't easy, but it was real. The hearing day came in late spring. The boardroom was stark, its long table polished to a sterile shine. Faculty members sat like judges, their expressions unreadable. I wasn't allowed inside, but I waited in the hall, my heart pounding with every muffled word that leaked through the door. Hours passed. When the door finally opened, Ethan stepped out, his face unreadable. My stomach dropped. "Well?" I asked, barely able to breathe. He looked at me for a long moment, then exhaled. "They're suspending me for the semester. No classes, no pay. But I keep my position. For now." It wasn't victory. It wasn't defeat. It was something in between. I braced myself for regret, for the bitterness of sacrifice. But instead, Ethan's hand found mine in the hallway, his grip steady. "They can take the job for a while, but they can't take you." And for the first time in months, I smiled without fear. Summer came. Without his classes to anchor us, the campus grew quieter, the gossip fading into background noise. We no longer had to hide in shadows. We walked side by side through town, sat together in cafes without flinching, shared laughter that didn't need to be stifled. It wasn't perfect. Strangers still stared. Some whispered, some judged. But the weight that had crushed us was gone, replaced with something lighter: freedom, fragile but real. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, we sat by the old fountain where so much had begun. The air was warm, scented with blooming magnolias. Ethan leaned back, watching the ripples in the water. "You know, I used to think happiness was something you earned after years of work, a prize at the end of the road. And now?" I asked, curling closer to him. He smiled, that soft, crooked smile that always undid me. "Now I know it's here, with you, in every stolen laugh, every quiet moment. It's not the end of the road. It's the road itself." My throat tightened. "I don't care what people say. I don't care what we lost. If it led me here, it was worth it." His hand found mine, our fingers lacing together. "Then promise me something." "What?" "No more apologies for existing. No more shrinking to fit the world's comfort. You're mine, and I'm yours. That's all that matters." Tears stung my eyes, but I nodded. "I promise." The world didn't suddenly change. Prejudice didn't vanish. Whispers didn't disappear. But we stopped letting them define us. We built a life together, one day at a time. Dinners in small-town diners where the waitresses smiled knowingly. Late-night talks about books and dreams and scars that never fully healed. Laughter in the rain. Arguments that ended in apologies and kisses. It was messy. It was hard. It was real. And for two men who'd once lived in shadows, one abandoned in a cafe, the other hiding behind walls of professionalism, it was everything. Looking back now, I realize that love isn't about avoiding pain. It's about choosing who's worth hurting for. Ethan showed up when no one else did. He made me laugh when I was drowning in shame. He believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And against all odds, I got to believe in him too. We weren't a scandal. We weren't a mistake. We were just two men who dared to love each other in a world that told us not to. And in the end, love won. Quietly, fiercely, unapologetically. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.